My next step on this painting is going to be to put the mountains in, and they're going to grade all the way down to the bottom of these trees, and then I've got to let that dry and then come back in and put this little row of foggy trees in. And then our last thing is going to be to put our trees in the foreground in. And I'll probably do that in 2 layers so that we can get a little bit of a foggy look to it. Okay. That is that. So what color am I mixing for that? I've got a mixture here in my pan that is ultramarine blue. I'm going to add ultramarine blue to it. It's burnt sienna and new gamboge, sort of a yellowy brown. And we are going to add burnt sienna to it. Margaret, your mouth is not working today. I'm going to add ultramarine blue to it to make a gray. And is this what I want, or do I need to add a little more blue? Do I like it like this? So this is pretty much of a neutral gray. I'm going to need a little bit more blue for the far part of those mountains, and the close part, do I want a neutral gray in there? I don't think so. I think I might want to add, let's add just a touch of quinacridone rose to it. I think I like that better. It's got a slightly brown tinge to it. And then I'll add a little bit of cobalt blue to it for part of those mountains when I set it down. So let's go ahead and start this with this, what I've got. And then I want to grade this down to 0. And my bigger brush, Margaret. I'll have to do this relatively quickly. So I put paint down and then I'm thinning it as I go down here. So I'm making it thin until I find my tree line here, which is not an absolute straight line. I'm going to grab that pretty quick, because if I don't, I'll end up with a hard edge there, which I don't want. And then we're going to do a little bit of cobalt blue into this gray on one side to do this far set of mountains here. And then just let that color sort of blend into these mountains, because I like that that's going to be just a little sort of drippy and foggy coming down there. And then let's go ahead and do this set of mountains over here. They're also that little bit more bluish. Might have to come back in after that's partially dried and add a little bit more. And then this little bit darker mountain in front, a little darker mountain in front. Gotta get back on here really quick because we need to have this wet spot for this to drip into. Get that foggy look coming down there. And then this is wetted all the way down to our trees. Let's come back in a little tiny bit more with this cobalt blue. There's a feeling of glaciers up in these mountains that if I come in and just, is that going to be too dark? I think it's too dark. Have to lift some of that off. Yeah, that's better. Lift some of that off. What I'm trying to do is leave some lighter spaces in there to become the glacier look. Same with here, just some lighter spaces. Oh, that actually works to lift that off of there. And then these mountains, let's just, while this is still damp, little tiny bit darker up at that top. Grab that water there. And then I want to make sure that this grades, so I've got to come and pick that up and pull it down into here just a little bit. Pull that into there just a little bit. Got to soften the bottom of that, pull it down a little bit. Onto some of these, this is Alaska, those peaks. I don't know whether this bigger brush was better or not now that I'm trying to do a little bit of detail work. I don't want these to look like little square hills. They have to look a little peaky because this is Alaska, and Alaska is a little peaky, little sharp mountains. That dry now. Pick up some of that just to make that a little lighter in part of this. This morning I painted in the mountains up above. I'm feeling like I'm going to need to maybe do just a tiny bit of lifting in here because this is maybe a little too defined there, and I just want to sort of soften that a little bit. I don't want to get down into where those trees are going to go because I don't want that wet there, but let's just do that little bit of lifting there and then leave it alone. Okay, so now I want to put in the next layer of this. Now that it's dry, I'm going to put in this sort of foggy layer of trees back in here. And to do that, I want the paint fairly wet so it'll go down really sort of smooshy. And the most important thing is going to be what my edges look like up here and the fact that it's a little bit darker at the bottom than it is at the top. So hopefully this will come out nice. My mixture, let's just sort of stay with the same thing that we've been working with, which is my burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and this time I'm going to add a little bit of my sap green to it. So it has a little more greenish tone, a little more blue than that. Let's see what this looks like on my scrap of paper. Too gray still. I want to put just a tiny bit more sap green in there just because I want this to lean a little tiny bit toward the green side. Yeah, and then I have another little batch of darker blue-green here from another project that I can drop into that to get some shift in color there. Yes, I think that's going to work, but I might need a little bit more of this. Let's just make a little bigger batch of that. That is just ultramarine blue and sap green without any of the burnt sienna in it. And a little more blue. Okay, I think I've got that close to what I had before. Let's just try dropping that into there. Yeah, okay, I think that's going to work. Okay. I've got a smaller brush here if I need it to work some of the top of that. I think what I'm going to want to do here is come in with this grayish color, and it's relatively warm today. I'm afraid things are going to dry pretty quick, so I need to work relatively fast. So I'm putting down some paint. I'm going to dampen my brush just a little bit, and now I want to start pulling this upward into where those trees are going to be at the top, out of that puddle. A few of them go up a little higher, some of them are shorter. And let's also, before this gets drying too quickly, I'm going to pull this right on down into this bottom, and I can add more paint into there later. But if I don't do this right now, and this is already starting to dry on me, and I need to really get this in here. And I can be a little bit uneven on this bottom where it hits the meadow. It can be a little uneven. Okay, so now let's just finish pulling this upward into these trees at the top and pick up that edge that was starting to form. And maybe there's another tree here that's maybe a little rounder. Maybe a little rounder. And then let's just drop a little bit of this darker green in here in front of this so that we can get some little bit darker. And I'm going to need to mix a little more sap green with this. And yes, there's trees back behind there, but I need to soften that. It's drying fast. It's drying fast. A little more gray. And is it too thick? I don't know if it's too thick. It's a okay. And let's find some darker spaces in here that come right down toward that bottom. Maybe become trees in among that foggy green that we've got happening there. Maybe there's going to be a little greener pieces. Maybe there's going to be some that are a little slightly brownish. I had an interesting set here that actually had a little bit of the feeling of that fireweed in it. And you know, maybe there are some trees back here that are a little bit turning color. And I don't want a huge color shift here at the top of that meadow. Maybe that can come up a little bit more, have that group together a little more on there. And I'm going to say that there is a tree here that's more deciduous looking. I think we need to stop with that because I want that pretty light and soft back in there. Don't want too much into it. And then we can think about whether or not I'd started to do, I'm just not sure on this, how much we want this to be this defined. Just soften that up out of that space. Soften that just a wee touch. And maybe there's some greenery that works its way in through this meadow back here. Just trying to find a little balance here so this still feels foggy, and maybe some of that can get softened. So maybe some of these greens are just going to soften through there just a little bit. And when I had painted this before, I had, we had this beautiful deep red over here that I absolutely loved, and I love the brightness of this, but I need a little balance between these two. So let's just maybe bring a little more color in here. little more darkness to some of this color, and maybe up in here as well. So don't lose that beautiful brightness in there, and then maybe dry brush this just a little more, get that working in there. I don't want that too strongly brush marked. Dry brushing is working nicely. And then maybe a little bit more green right in here. And maybe we are at the point where I need to stop doing any of this. Yeah. And we'll just maybe soften a couple of those spots where that joined to keep that foggy look happening. And maybe that foggy look is going to just work its way right up into there, and that feeling of having color and then not having color and some of it disappearing is giving this foggy look. Okay. I'm thinking I should back out of here. Maybe that's too dark right there. And those far mountains, maybe I could lift a little tiny bit more off of them. Feeling it was a little too dark for those far mountains back there, especially if it's going to be a little foggy like this. I just lighten those up a little bit, and their intersection into this part here, lighten that just a little bit. Yeah, I like that a little better. Maybe that funny little peak there was not feeling natural. I have a feeling it's time for me to stop, and we'll let this be for now. Some things about this hammock that I maybe don't like, but I'm going to worry about that later. So let me go ahead and stop here at this point. One other thing, that was a little too dark right there compared to anywhere else in the green. So just wanted to lift that just a hair. Balance, 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 balance. Okay, I think that's a little closer.